one must be energized and motivated to learn more about the possibility and opportunity in the bright future of Africa. I'd like to begin by thanking my good friend, Dr. Evans Woherens, and his team of dedicated professionals who plan and organize such a prestigious event every year since 2013. More importantly, I'd like to thank you all for joining us for the third and the final day of this conference. I'd like to begin my talk with a few questions. It's in the morning, I want to get your brain juice going. The first question I have is, how does one gain wisdom? The first question, a Greek philosopher once said that you don't know what you don't know. And I heard this quote as I entered the workforce back in 1980. Over the years, I come to realization that the more you know, the more you realize you don't know. And the less you know, the more you think you know. Ultimately, I come to the conclusion that the wisdom comes to each of us when we realize how little we understand life, ourselves, and the world around us. Just a couple more questions. I think this is kind of gets you thinking. The first question I have is, are there more people alive today than ever lived? In the other word, are there more people living now than those passed away for the last 4,000 years? That's question one. Question two is, in 40 years, the study showed that urban capacity development will double over past 40,000 years. At this point, I usually have a quick poll and get people to answer the question yes or no for both of them. For the interest of time, I'm just gonna share the result with you and move on. I'll save the first questions to the end, to answer the end. But let me answer the second question first. The first question, usually you get about 50% yes and 50% no. I'll say that to the end. The second question, usually I get overwhelming majority of the right answer. And the answer is yes. And that's why. With this great migrations, we see that 3 million people moving to cities every year. There are 220,000 football fields that take over every single day. By 2030, around 50 cities with more than 10 million people. From today, there's only 29. In 1950, there's only 83 cities that has more than 1 million people. But today, there are 468 cities and more than 1 million people, including the city of Abuja. So yes, the answer is yes. Right now, 50% of the population in the world lives in the city, in the urban cities. In 30 years, 2050, there will be 70% of us will be living in the city, leaving so few behind. And as I say, in 40 years, the urban build-up is going to be twice as many as we did in the last 4,000 years. Let me give you a little bit of my viewpoint from my perspective. Time really flies. 4 years ago, I was in Abuja and met many of you in person. Since then, I got involved in many United Nations initiatives related to sustainable development goals. I also founded a venture capital firm with my partners to invest in disruptive technologies for the betterment of humanity. This year, I also got elected as the president of IEEE Technology Engineering Management Society, or known as TEMS. If you look at the history and the achievement of the human being in building the building structures, since 4,000 years ago when the pyramid was erected, over 4,000 years there really isn't any building that was built taller than pyramid. Not until late 18th century, when the building that Equitable Life in New York shows up. Uh, at the high rise at the time. But since then, you can see that the curve actually rises up exponentially. The skyscrapers are getting taller and taller every year and reaching the sky. So in the last 150 years, you can see all the different tall rises and skyscrapers showing up in different parts of the city. And I think Shanghai is probably one of the most developed ones with a new skyscraper every time I visit it every month. But many scientists attributed to that the reason that we were able to erect higher structures, skyscraper, is because of the invention of the I-beam. The invention of I-beam allowed people to stop building higher structures, and it then released the possibility of taller and taller and taller buildings. And in scientific arena, we call these the reflection point, where it takes off the curve. This conference focuses on Society 5.0, and it has been talked about over the last 2 days. I would just like to summarize a little bit in there and give my perspective. Society 1.0 is agricultural, it's hunting and gather society. That is Society 1.0. Society 2.0 is agricultural society, where we grow plants, we start feeding people with the plants. Society 3.0 is industrial society. And today, Society 4.0 is an information society we're right now. In 2018, Japan proposed in the World Economic Forum that Society 5.0 will be the future new societies. And that's since been adopted by many scientists and many studies. Now, what is a 5.0? It terms as a super smart society, the society that solves problems and create value instead of leveraging economic of scale. Instead of mass produce, it creates solve very high difficult problems, technical problems. The society here, equal opportunity exists for everyone, and not just a small concentration of elite, the 1%. It's leveling the playing field for many people to be able to compete and to be able to share the wealth. 5.0 will allow people can confidently live and pursue ambitions without constant fear of vulnerability, that somebody will be stealing your identity, somebody will hack into your system, somebody will do harm to you, your finances, as well as your physical beings. Society 5.0, we think that humankind will live in harmony with nature instead of placing high stress on environment due to mass consumption of resources. This brings up a new reality 2.0. In society 4.0, knowledge and information are shared. A cross-sectional collaboration is inefficient. But with society 5.0, we connect all the people and things to the share of IoT, various knowledge, information, and create the new bodies. So it actually takes the cyber system and the physical system, and it merges into cyber and physical world become one entity. We live in the other dimensions. So here do we need the ID in this day and age? and many scientists study and come to some of the high priority. First is the manufacturing. You need to scale up improvement manufacturing so we can produce high quality goods. And we need to escalate our technologies and our services in healthcare, especially in this era of the global pandemic. More importantly, you need to have the mobility to connect people around the world, both physically and virtually, and to be able to share information so you can collaborate amongst different parts of the country and the citizens. And more importantly, everything requires the energy, the power. And we need to be able to develop the energy structures provided to everywhere around the world. Today, there's still many areas around the world without electricity. And also, we need to increase our output of agriculture because of the population increase that we're going to see in the near future. And I think none of this was talking about in the agriculture. How do you meet the demand? How do you get into that inflection that where the exponential growth happens? But I want to paint a little bit different on the innovation side of agriculture. About 2 years ago, there is people start talking about plant-based meat. Plant-based meat is the meat tastes like meat, smell like meat, and looks like meat, but is produced of the plant, coming out of the plant. And what significant that was is that they're now offering that around the world in a fast food. You can go Beyond Burgers in McDonald's and Harvey in different places. But the really significant of that is the amount of meat that you produce with the plant-based meat. It needs 99% less water, and it requires 93% less of land. And it actually reduces the greenhouse gas emissions by 90%. Think about that for the environment, and you can produce the same amount of quality meat. And also, it only requires half the energy that's required as animal meat. The plant-based meat market are forecast to reach 85 billion by 2030. 2 weeks ago, Kentucky Fried Chicken announced that, known as KFC, they're going to roll out lab-grown chicken nuggets made by 3D bioprinting solution printers. The nugget will be available this fall in Moscow. The new nugget will be made in a lab with chicken and plant cell via bioprinting, a process that uses 3D printing techniques to combine biological material. In the earlier days, this technology was used for the applications of medical applications of generating tissues and organs. Let's talk a little bit about Industry 4.0. Industry 4.0 is from the technology aspect of it. If you look at that, Industry 1.0 is steam and water power, a power that replaces human with animal power and machines. And in that era, we see locomotive, steamship, and connecting people. Industry 2.0 is electricity. With the introduction of electricity, we see automobile, airplane, telephone, radio, and mass productions by electricity. In 3.0, Industry 3.0, we see electronics, the Internet of and IT to further automate and mass production of technology, and we're now venturing into cyberspace. Well, in Industry 4.0, we call them the cyber physical systems. And we are seeing these biotechnology, as I mentioned, artificial intelligence, big data, blockchain, quantum computing, with human interactions in cyberspace. When we talk about society 5.0, we talk about people, culture. When we talk about industry 4.0 revolution, we are focused on the advancement of the technology. As my friend Stephen Ibaraki, who was the keynote yesterday, he has been saying for years that we are into the fifth machine unlimited X revolution, or 5 MUX is called it. And there are three major clusters: the biological cluster, the physical clusters, like 4D printing, IoT, cyberspace, robotics, and drones, and digital, where you see machine learning, deep learning, big data, blockchain, quantum computing. And I'm going to go through some of these and give you some examples. One of the most popular, a lot of project comes out on genome projects in the biotechnologies. Genome editing is one that is front and center, and there's a good example that we can use. It can copy and paste your DNA and replace the bad one. Genome cloning, there are several scientists were able to clone different species, and synthetic genomics, which is having manipulated genetics of the plant and produce a new DNA of the entire platform that could be useful for a human. The genome editing, the best example would be the CRISPR-Cas9. CRISPR-Cas9 is well known that it's able to edit your copy and paste your DNA that could resulting in maybe curing some diseases or avoiding some diseases. One of the examples that I saw last year as one of the judges for a global pitching contest in Singapore with more than 1,000 startups competing for the grand prize, nearly $1 million. One of the finalists of the contest was seafood in the lab. Shockingly raised, Shockingly raised nearly $5 million in the second round. I tasted the dim sum they produced, and truly I cannot tell the difference between the one they produced and the one with the real shrimp as recipes. I want to cover a little bit about 5G, 4G, 5G, because this really is what these conferences about. But a lot of discussion was done about talking about the performance of 5G, how fast it's going to be. But there are other areas that's very important that 5G brings to the sciences and to the technologies, like the latencies. Latency is a delay between the user interactions and web application responses to that action. That in 5G has increased 50 times. The frequency spectrum, which defines the bandwidth, it also increased tenfold. It's like widening a one-lane highway to a 10-lane highway for the infrastructure, allowing a lot more traffic, allowing the traffic go at higher speed. But it's important to note that this coverage of number of devices in a 1 kilometer square, it increased tenfold. What does that mean? I'll give you an example for you. Quantum computing. Last week, Google announced that quantum computing, their computer completed calculation in 200 seconds that Google claimed would have taken even the most powerful supercomputer 10,000 years to complete. And we are starting to talk about quantum supremacy. And that is when the big companies are competing for the position of quantum computing. IBM has Q that has 20 qubits in the cloud, and they are offering 50 qubits testing and ready to release. Google has the Bristol cone that offering 72 qubits. As the world generates 2.5 billion of gigabyte data, the information every day, each and every day, the digital computer just cannot keep up with the demands of the calculations. And quantum computing will really help. China has the world's biggest quantum computing research complex at 37 hectare site in Hefei at the cost of $11.9 billion USD. In IEEE, next year, next month, in October, we will have a first inaugural IEEE Quantum Computing Week. And it will take place in October 12th to 16th virtually. The IEEE Quantum Computing Week is a multidisciplinary quantum computing venue where attendees has the unique opportunity to discuss challenges and opportunities with quantum researchers, scientists, engineers, entrepreneurs, developers, students, practitioners, educators, programmers, and newcomers. So it's 1 week with nearly 270 hours of different events and programming. And actually, 10, we are hosting a workshop that will be talking about the entrepreneurship of the quantum computing and how big corporations invest to start a quantum computing. One of the things that we said that 5G is very important is that in the future, when you start talking about hologram, you want to transport holograms, it will be a huge amount of data being transferred. And 5G comes in to be able to take your hologram and project it somewhere else in the world. Microsoft Lens, HoloLens 2, is the first self-contained holographic computer. It enables you to engage your digital content and interact with the hologram. HHS2 enhanced by reliability, security, and scalability of AI services on Microsoft. I'm going to pause now and play a quick video for you, and I will be returning. So bear with me when I switch the channel.
First, I'm going to put on my HoloLens 2 here, and then we'll flip in the room to the special camera so you can see exactly what I'm seeing. Let's get started. First, let me introduce you to Mini-Me. There she is, my perfect holograph. And thanks to the power of HoloLens 2, she just floats right with me. I'm literally holding my hologram, so natural. Now she's a little small to do a keynote. So let's get her up so she can do full-size Japanese keynote. Render keynote.
Hologram になることには本当に驚くべきことがあります。私たちは最新の複合現実キャプチャ技術を使用し、私のホログラムを作成しています。実在の人物をホログラムとして見たことがあるかもしれませんが、私が実際に日本語を話しているのが新しいのです。私は日本語を話しませんが、私の声とホログラムは完璧。
Can you hear me now, Uzo? Uzo, can you hear me? Can you unmute yourself?
Proceed.
Okay, great, thanks. I'm just going to continue where I left off. So I assume you can hear me and you can see me. So let me just move on to the next slide. The one I want to talk about next is the extended reality. Extended reality, XR, it refers to virtual, augmented, and mixed reality, and it provides full digital immersive experience. In July, I had the president of Israel, President Ravillin, that in my living room, using the technology on the cell phone to bring his Israel Independence Day speech and make it in my living room. And it's actually using a augmented reality app called Tel Aviv, and it creates the actual hologram and allow you to impose augmented in any real environment. So that was one of the leading technology coming out of Israel. I want to cover a little bit now about the artificial intelligence. According to DARPA of USA, the first wave of artificial intelligence is called traditional programming. Programmers figure out how to solve the particular problem and turning their insight into code. We also call it handcraft knowledge. That's the first wave. The second wave, we call the neural net and deep learning. Neural networks such as machine learning and deep learning, able to properly digest big data, result in narrow discipline like game playing, automated driving, image recognition, text and speech to text translation. It's what we call statistical learning. Now we're venturing into merging the third wave of AI. Third wave of AI is the common structures of many cognitive architectures. And the artificial intelligence will start to be able to reason with you. It could start to filling the gap of the data that's missing. Say, if you have a lot of data to represent a cow, if you don't, you could not have the whole 100% of the data of the cow. So the artificial intelligence, when they interpret it, they can tell you, well, this picture is about 90% of cow, just based on statistics. But with the third wave, it will be able to, like people, to inducing, to fill the gap of the knowledge. So the AI system themselves will construct models. It will explain how the world actually works. So it could come up with Einstein C and C squared, just like the third wave of the intelligence. IEEE 10, we collaborated with Artificial Intelligence for Good with the United Nations in Geneva initially, but because of COVID-19, it got converted into a virtual conference. And we are featuring member research paper on technology management of AI. And we invited keynote speakers, and the best paper that out of the paper that's submitted to presented will get highlighted in the main event of ITU AI for Good. And this event is free to IEEE members, but I'm glad to tell you that we will offer this to all the conference attendees of Digital Africa as well with a special code. We need to talk a little bit about the blockchain and the global trend. As you know, Samsung is looking into blockchain for their huge global supply chain. They expect that they're going to cut their costs by 20%. Now, Walmart can track mango shipments in 2.2 seconds when they take them 7 days and 2 years back. Korean government created a blockchain platform focused on welfare, public safety, transportation by 2023. Some of these links there is for you to be able to read the whole article. So if you click on my presentation, you will see different links that contain additional information where the research comes from. The four predict that the top 10, top 50 globally, 22% will be, 11 of them will be using blockchain or using connected to cryptocurrencies. Now, one of the biggest drawbacks on a blockchain is it requires huge computing power and resources, electricity to compete to find the next block. And that doesn't work really well when you want the real time, when you want to get security on the real time. The new form of blockchain emerges. Hashgraph is used by consortium of 6,000 banks in North America, formed by Union Nation Associations and Mountain West Credit Union Association. They choose the swirl Hashgraph to create the appropriate network among all of them, and their extension based on the Hashgraph. In the big data world, in 2016, we see that science mapped entire human history. In 2020, the data volume was grown to 44 zettabytes. By 2020, it's 50 times more than what it was 2010. And there are 26 billion IoT devices around the world that are generating data. Norwegian Telecom AI and Big Data Lab is one of the first labs that doing AI and blockchain, distributed AI. I think the lab produced how to deploy blockchains on AI. AI and quantum computing, they have the power to analyze this data and solve the grand challenge problem that guide our future. So you can see that just one simple autonomous driving machine with the data it generated over close to 4,000 gigabytes every day. So it requires a lot of data transmissions to the IoT devices. And that's where 5G, that's where blockchain, that's where other technology emerge to solve the problem. In the industry, you'll see that emerging the blockchain technology into what they call Tango, over by this company called IOTA. What it is another technology that allow you to deploy blockchains. And in the city of Taipei, they partner with IOTA to equip every citizen with Tango ID cards, and they can interact with their smart city tag around the city. When you start to think about it, COVID-19 is the inflection point for many things that we're facing. You can see that just by the stock prices. If you look at Zoom, for instance, since January, their price was stuck, rocket high. And you can also see that Google, Apple, Amazon, the big tech company, they have the same advantage of getting these exponential growth. There are 4 stages of global pandemic. It depends on how you manage them that really impact your global economy, your economy. The first stage is disease does not spread locally. It's just coming from outside. The second stage is defined by who World Health Organization is. They are starting to have the local transmission, the community transmission. And the third stage is when the source of the infection is no longer traceable. It's contained and it's spread. The fourth stage, and there's only a few countries got into the fourth stage, such as China and some of the other countries that are facing right now. The spread is practically uncontrollable there are many major cluster infections all over the country, and that is the fourth stage. Tracking is probably the most important thing to control the different stage. If you want to be able to bring down to stage one, you need a very high-tech tracking and to be able to implement around the country. China is the one that's leading the tracing. Like in March, Shanghai introduced the QR code for their citizens. And what a QR code is that you have an app and your code gets scanned by before you enter into any public places or public transportations, and it will tell you if you're green, yellow, or red. The green code means that residents can go to public places or commuting using public transit. But people with yellow and red code must be held under quarantine and report their health information every day before they are allowed traveling around the city. And they weren't even allowed to take any taxis or any of their quarantine for 14 days. COVID-19 is also a major disruptor. It disrupts the economy in a major way. As you know, Hertz is the largest car rental company in the world, with worth of more than 25 billion. And in May, Hertz declared bankruptcy because nobody's traveling. In April, Frontier, a major global communication corporation, filed for bankruptcy. And you'll be thinking about why communication companies go bankrupt. Because in the age of global pandemic, communication is more important. And people will be using more communication. They should be getting more business. But the reality is that you cannot grow your business if you don't have infrastructure. What Frontier did not see is that they did not invest on the infrastructure of their broadband structure, including laying fiber all over the places. And this is actually what highlighted, talked about in the keynote speech on the day one, that infrastructure comes first. You got to invest on the fiber infrastructure before you can build 5Gs and others. Now, you also see that the energies start getting impacted once the COVID-19 announced, especially the gas and oil industry. People do not drive, people do not use cars, and you see some casualties like just Cafe Energies in a state that worth 16 billion when it's bankrupt. And of course, the retail took a major hit because all the stores could not open. And some of the largest stores, global chains, also went bankrupt. The more interesting thing is that Airbnb, one of the what we call the unicorn of our era, took them 12 years, according to the Airbnb CEO, Brian Chesky. It took them 12 years to build what they are, and they lost everything in 6 weeks. So you can see the disruptions economically around the world with COVID-19. Now, globally, if you measure the country by country, their domestic product, the GDP, it's a very interesting trend that you see. Well, this is the Q2 result of the financial impact, the global GDP impact, the increases and decreases. All the countries are suffering major decline in their GDP. But in Q2, China actually made up 11.5%. And the reason? China was one of the first countries that hit COVID-19. When they hit the Q2, they already got into contained stage. They will start shipping their masks, their PPE protective equipment, their ventilators around the world. and making huge sales and profit. They actually gained not just what they lost on the first Q1, they lost about 6.1 the first year. The first quarter, they started back and increased more. South Korea is another interesting observation. They were able to keep their economy mostly open despite the coronavirus. Occasionally they get way up. In the country announced, I think they have about 3.3% of decrease in their pandemic impact, global impact, and we see that in the Q3 it's fallen by about just about 1.4%. So the impact of that is very small. Now, by the end of the year 2020, no country is projected to hit harder than country of the United Kingdom. Therefore, 11.5% predicted. China expected to be a lot better. Maybe by the time they get to year end, about 2.6% decline. The United States somewhere in the middle, at packing about 7.3% of the declines in their GDP. Now, many after the in the midst of pandemic, one of the biggest issue is how do you reopen school? How do you get the children back to school to learn? I think that is a much bigger impact than just the economy. Not having children back to school, the remote virtual training really isn't able to deliver because of infrastructure and other challenges. But if you look at the country around the world, who suddenly open the school, the interesting one would be the Denmark. Denmark is the first Western country to reopen the school on April 15th. And they got approval from the government to reopen with a model called cluster model. Cluster model is different than that of traditional bubble models. The cluster model is actually having a class of kids together. So a group of 30 kids will be in one class, and they'll be in one class with the teachers the whole day. And they do not interact with anybody else in the school. And they have their own classes, and they do not need social distancing. They don't need masks. They will just play as though they would play in a normal day. So that really, that strategy kind of paid off. They were able to contain, when it flare up, they were able to contain to that small group and tracing and eradicate the COVID-19 infections. South Korea has been trying to open school several times, but they had to delay it. And they weren't able to open school till about May. So they were hoping to get started earlier, but they, with all the different flare up, they were able to do that. Now the interesting one is Israel. Israel actually opened with a bubble model. The bubble model is the one that we used to, with the social distancing of 2 meters and with the mask and to avoid any human-to-human transitions. But they opened the school with the bubble models in May 3rd. Within 2 weeks, within a month, they had to close the school down because there were more than 2,000 students, teachers, and staff were test positive for COVID-19. So it is not easy to deal with the school reopening. Now, many governments has provided assistance program, and many countries provide a subsidy to help unemployment and business owners impacted COVID-19. The U.S. government took one more. The UK government took one more step further. They recently introduced the Eating Out to Help Out initiative to boost the food and beverage industry. Interestingly, 89% of people are eating out more frequent, and 75% of people are concerned about contacting the COVID-19. Now, the way the U.S. government works, if it doesn't work, is they will pay 50% of your meal if you go into the restaurant. Doesn't matter which restaurant, so if they are qualified. You will get, and for the whole month of August. So it
Hello,
really
Andy.
boosts up the economy.
You have few minutes. Yes, left.
Okay, I'll close it up. Okay, so let me wrap it up in another five minutes. One of the things about COVID-19 is a lot of misinformation, and the misinformation including some of the things that happened around the world. There was a video that was surfacing a couple of weeks ago on the firework that was prepared for Tokyo opening, but because of COVID-19, it pushed to 2021. But the firework cannot keep, so they released the firework, and it just. I know you didn't hear the sound, but it turns out that that video was produced technically by artificial intelligence, and if you look closely, there was no smoke, and it was produced back in 2015, and they just reused it, but people were just going crazy on it. Now, in IEEE, we have these COVID-19 resource centers where it will be that all our researchers will submit their research in one place for people to get the information. One of the researchers submitted a media platform to detect misinformation, and misinformation are really they found out that it's by the bot that generate misinformation, and they presented their research in a conference. In a global conference, and their finding is that the bot is generating the misinformation, but furthermore, some of the bots they're collaborating each other to generate and spread information. And this researcher was able to do detecting tool to stop all that. Now, there's impact of jobs, and well, I probably won't have enough time to cover all the points here. But if you think about it, the automations in era, it actually resulted in loss of the job because machines could replace humans working. But in the future of the digital transformation, the loss of jobs is because those jobs will no longer be needed there. Right? If you look at the study from World Economic Forum, it tells you that by 2022, 75 million of the jobs will be lost. But then there are 133 million new jobs will come in. So you'll be requiring new skills. The 58 cents of core skills will be retained, but 42 of them you need to new skills. And the new skills have to match up with what the technology they use. So for that, they release the data on what type of technology will be used in different sectors, energy or financial. There's two samples here, energy, utilities, and financial in red. And it gives you an idea about like the big data is almost the same, 85, 86% of the company will be using them. But if you talk about web-based applications, the finance company will do a lot more. The skill set's going to change, right? So some of the stuff that we had in the past, 2018 will no longer require. Things like the memory, verbal, and the communication skills that we vitally require. Reading, writing, math, and that would start to become less of the high priority because of artificial intelligence. But that is true on the workforce. But as a global leader, I think it's awfully important that if you wanted to train the global leader, they have to have not just traditional strong technical skills, they have to have strategic thinkers, seeing a big picture, but more importantly, they have to have emotional intelligence. So be able to work with the others, you can do negotiations, you can manage the conflicts, and you can learn from mistakes. And Jacinda Ardern, the New Zealand Prime Minister, is a fine example of the modern leader. The way she handled COVID-19 really saved the country. This is actually, we have 4,200,000 people, 420,000 people around the world. And we offer, we have about 160 countries as members. And we also offer 2,000 conferences every year and 5 million of publications.
A
And,
minute remaining, Andy.
okay, no problem. And then there is, we also have generated standards. So, last slide here about TEMS. TEMS, we are focused on people. Collectively, we have vision of leaders enabling product and services. And we focus on getting ideas to product, moving product services from idea to market. We identify, implement successful projects, and we integrate technological capability and productivity development, and we develop engineers to leaders. And we balance the norm of the society, government, and regulators. So in closing, I just wanted to answer the questions. So is there more people alive today than there is in the past? The answer is no. Right now, we have about more than 7 billion people around the world. But according to standards, there are more than 9 billion people passed in the past. So that concludes my presentation. And here is my QR code for my LinkedIn. So feel free to reach out to me, and I'll be more than happy to answer some of your questions of mine. Uzo, back to you.